Hi, my name is Ana Stefania, and I will be the moderator of this debate about of inclusive language in Spanish. Well, inclusive language is according to area a set of strategies that are meant to avoid one of the grammatical masculinity as generic. This is intended to prevent the spread of prejudice about sexism and gender inequality. The use of the gender masculine as a unmarked gender, although it does not constitute direct sexism discrimination, does represent a normalization of invisibility of the woman and other genders, but there are also a side against it that believe that this gender inequality problem will not be solved by discerning the language it should not be a relevant topic. So I will present the expertise of that came up today to this debate. So present yourself and please tell us your position of this topic. And we can start with Adrian.
Hi, my name is Adrian Cantu. I'm a professor at RAE, and I believe Spanish is a beautiful language and we need to protect it. And it does evolve and it will change, but it's not something that you can force. It does so naturally. It's useless to try and force the specific language. If it comes, it will come with the never-ending evolving language that is Spanish.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Agustin Martinez, please.
Hi, my name is Agustin Martinez. I also work at the RAE. I also believe that Spanish is a beautiful language. And I do believe that Spanish doesn't discriminate against anyone. You can be inclusive with the words that we already have. The language can evolve and will evolve, but I also believe that you can force it.
Thanks, Agustin. Eric?
Well, my name is Eric Brambila. I'm a social activist and I've been studying inclusive language and any forms of discrimination for many years. And I believe inclusive language is a very good way to reduce the discrimination towards gender neutral people or whoever wants to use it. And I believe it does comes naturally, and it's something that it's coming because of we evolving as a persons and as a language.
And for last but not least, Rebecca.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Rodriguez. I'm a teacher of social studies. I believe that the inclusive language is a fighting for empower people of all genders to make decisions about their own body and not to hand those choices or decisions to others.
Thank you very much. I will start with the first question. How much impact does language have upon society? We can start with the part upon this topic. Adrian?
I believe that well, it's important since it's a reflection through slang and many other specific words. You can see how society is developing and what people think, but it's not a reflection of a sexist society. It's just a set of rules for people to communicate. Well, the only reflection I can think of towards or against sexism is, well, slang and how people like to abbreviate words or use them differently in different sections of well, Spanish speaking countries. But I do not think it's really a reflection of a sexist society or that it should be changed. I think it may be a reflection of how people want to speak, but it's not something that can be changed or forged by laws or by just changing the rule set in RAE or different ways.
Something to add, Agustin?
Well, I would like to add that in RAE, we do believe that discrimination is a bad thing. We are in favor of feminists. We are in favor of the LGBT community. But we believe that the language that we have, the Spanish words that we have already, doesn't discriminate against anyone.
Thank you very much. What do you think about these statements, Eric and Becca?
I just want to say a fun fact about the RAI, that in 2019, the RAI in general is made up of 26% of women and the other percent is men. And I don't think that's inclusive at all. That is not like equitative. Can you tell me why?
Well, mainly because in the past, that's right, we already, not everyone, well, to be part of RAE, you have to have certain qualifications. And in the past, the most people that have it were men, because obviously in the past we were more sexist, but now we are trying to be more inclusive. But we cannot like graft like any woman to be part of RAE. The person, not the woman, the person has to have some qualifications.
Adrian?
Yeah, as Agustin was saying, we do not discriminate towards or against, but we will not do the opposite. So if there's more men qualified, there will be more men, and we won't force to attain a certain diversity standard. We do not have that standard. We believe that the most qualified person for the job should get it. So that's why they're men. If there were women, it's just a matter of probability. And as Agustin said, maybe because of sexist past or context, perhaps that it has an effect right now. And we support the fact that it's changing, and we like the fact that it's changing, but we will not force diversity into our into the right.
Eric?
Well, I just want to share my my point of view in the impact of society of the inclusive language, and I want to say its main purpose is to validate a third gender, because its existence it is to reduce the discrimination generated towards the gender neutral people and having a way to make them feel part of society. Because imagine being someone that already suffers so much from not being able to identify as one or another as the standards of society, and not having like something to relate to you. Like for me, it's like a way to accept them and to make them part of us. And also I don't believe that the language necessarily needs to change, but more like we could add inclusive language to what we have. It's not like we need to make it the standard, but we can add up and like we can use it with what we already have and what already exists.
Something to add, Becca?
I just want to say that it doesn't have to be pretty or it doesn't have to be accepted by the Real Academia Española, because this inclusive language is a language that marks a discontent and a social discomfort of people.
Thank you very much. I have a question for the against part. Spanish is already a distorted language. So what happened if they change it again? Every language adapt to the people who speak it. So what do you think about this? Adrian?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Spanish is already a distorted language. What happened if it changed again? Every language adapt to the people who speak it. Like every single language have an evolution, I will say like that, for the adaptation of each person, because not all, we are not the same people as 100 years ago. Yeah. Do you get it? Or-
Yeah. Okay, so basically there's some misconception about RAE. Some people believe that we are an institution, that we choose which words should and shouldn't be classified as correct. But the thing is that we don't work that way. So what basically happens is when enough people use a certain word, we registered it as correct. So it's not about which one is phonetically correct, it's which one is being used. That's why certain words that shouldn't be grammatically correct, which are some kind of slang, which are some English speaking words that are converted, are classified as correct because enough people use them. That's the thing with inclusive language. If enough people used it and speak that way, then we will. And when it happens, we will classify it as correct and established language. But since not many people use it or not enough people use it, that's why we haven't made it. It's just a matter of people talking. Since we do not create the language, we just registered it. What's already being spoken, we write it and we register it as correct.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Agustin, something do you want to add?
Well, most words that we are using today are new, especially like I will talk about technology, right? 100 years ago, the technology was way different. And now we have words like computer that didn't exist back then. And we have like making a correct version of it. Like we say, well, you can say in Spanish, computer or ordenador, which both represent the same thing. And every year we add some words. For example, 2 years ago, we added COVID as a word, even though you shouldn't say it like that, because scientifically speaking, you have to say coronavirus or COVID SARS-2 to 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 talk about to talk about COVID, but because enough people are using COVID, we make it and say that it is a correct way to refer to it.
Thank you very much, Agustin. Rebecca?
I have a question about the problematic of people who don't match the traditional binarism. People who are against inclusive language often promote a lot of violence and aggression where the use of inclusive language is dismissed. I want to ask Adrian or Agustin, why does that happen?
Adrian?
So there are certain things that will happen, doesn't matter the context. So for example, I can ask you why there are certain people that fight and literally get people to the hospital because they call them by the wrong pronoun. And well, that shouldn't be the case, but I'm not saying that's what you believe in. And that's what RAI doesn't believe in violence and doesn't believe in fighting for to protect the language. Since we don't actually protect the language, we just record it. And we are just classifying the language, and that's what RAE does. And we believe that unless inclusive language is completely established in Mexico, we won't, or in Spanish speaking countries, sorry, we won't record it as real. And we don't think language should be a matter of violence, and we don't believe that's really an important, or someone should base their self-worth on how other people call them. I think that's unnecessary, and it's just a certain kind of validation that shouldn't be necessary.
Eric?
Well, I want to answer that it is believed that the lack of the inclusive language, it can be a reflection of the invisibility towards women that we have been seeing on society and what feminists is fighting for so long. And if that's the case, then it can be used that it's the same as the argument as when 100 years ago or many years ago, like people were discriminating Black people, and years ago women even weren't even able to vote. And I just believe that inclusive language is the next step in this kind of things, like how we are just now fighting for feminists and the LGBT community. And this is some part of it, like not accepting the inclusive language is like negating the evolution of us as a society and the validation and acceptance of new people who are different than us.
Thank you very much, Eric. Next question will be, is the use of generic masculine as unmarked gender exist? Rebecca.
Well, I want to say something that there is two types of inclusive language. The first one is the non-sexist language. It was formed by the feminist movement in the late 80s and early 90s. And the main point about it is the central visibility of the female gender in the discourses. And also, one of the things they want to promote is to avoid the masculine in speeches. For example, I will say this in Spanish so you can understand this. Todos, ellos, when there's also women there. And one example of the use is the use of slashes, arrobas, an X. When we're writing something, we used to put X. And the other one is the gender inclusive language that we are talking about right now. And it begins to form in this new century in 2000s. And the boom in Latin America was in the year of 2018. And the main goal is to break the binarism of the Spanish system. There is no just men and women, there's also people who are non-binary. And one example of how we use this is with the use of E and also with the X in the writing. The problem with the X is the oralization because it's really difficult. So instead we use the E, for example, todes. So we can include all. Todas, todos, todes. Yeah.
Eric.
I also want to add that I do not believe that the masculine gender in words is necessarily in like an marked gender that is neutral, because one of the main arguments that people use against inclusive language is that there are many things to refer to them with not necessarily using pronouns or gender neutral words. Like when you're describing someone, you say like she is loco or loca, and that's like gender or ella or él. And well, using pronouns in a conversation is pretty much the standard in many situations because of what we are used to and how we develop talking and all that stuff. So I believe having something to refer to the gender neutral people, it's necessary and it's also useful.
Something to add, Rebecca?
Yes, I want to add something that the gender inclusive language also give a place and respect to how people want to be named. And I think that's a really good way to still promote the inclusive language and be respectful about it.
Something to say, the part against Adrian, Agustin? Adrian?
Sure. Well, everything you two said about first, it was that inclusive language is the standard or should be the standard. Well, that depends on people. It doesn't depend on what you believe in, but it depends on what people say. So if people use inclusive language, then it should be the norm. But right now, people accept the masculine as ungendered, and it is, and it's well, when it was created, it was created that way. But there are also morphosynthetic and lexical semantical resources that help you avoid using pronouns altogether, such as using sentences like aquel que hizo el trabajo, quien quiera, quienes are certain words that avoid using pronouns altogether. And you can use that way. And that words could be the norm, but they aren't because they are more complicated and they are unnecessarily, they are unnecessary. So basically how language works is that people want to speak when they're speaking informally. They want to speak fast, they want to use slang, they want to speak quickly and express themselves easily. They won't use unnecessary language, and that's where inclusive language lands. That's the reason it hasn't stick, and it won't for a while at least. But if it does, right, we'll accept it and we'll write it. But I believe it hasn't been established because it complicates language unnecessarily. And well, I believe that language can be a reflection of what society thinks, but it's not a means to fight it. So when if you can say, if the issue against discrimination, like sexism, is resolved, then people will use the language, inclusive language. But forcing people to use inclusive language will not help solve the problem. It will just create a resistance, as some of you already stated. It will create an unnecessary resistance, and it will be weird because people would fight back and even turn violent. It's because language is not a means to fight discrimination. It can be a reflection of it being solved, but it's not a means to fight it. So you can't force language.
Something to add, Agustin?
Yeah, I would like to add to what I have advanced data right now is that there exists but most languages that are on gender, like English, which is an on gender language. But in English speaking country, there also exists discrimination. So saying that having like inclusive language here in Spanish will solve discrimination automatically, that's not true. It's simply not true. Like I've said, there have ungendered languages which have already discriminate against everyone, or most people. What Adrian also said is that there exists like words right now that are a gender, and like I will like if you're like making a speech like Rebecca said, you use todos, and or you can use todos or todas, or you can say other things like la comunidad, which is a gender, right? Everyone is part of a community. Of the community, for example, if we're talking about students, la comunidad estudiantil, and it includes everyone, no matter how the gender of the person. You can like learn how to talk in that gender way. I know it's more difficult and you have to talk and think about it, but you can already do it with the words that we have already in Spanish. But as I have said, the language can change, can evolve. If enough people talk in an inclusive language, we as a RAE will accept it. But as of right now, it doesn't have it. It doesn't exist enough people.
Thanks, Agustin. Eric?
Okay, I just want to add a little thing that in every language, even it is an ungender language, there is some sort of way to have an inclusive language or some sort of thing to give validation to gender neutral people. For example, as you said, in English, even though it is a gender language, there are still pronouns, and what the people use in English is use they them for people that are gender neutral, non-binary. So even though the Spanish it is a gender language and it might be more of a problem, every language has some sort of way to validate and to use it. And I also believe that in your points, even though you say that society evolves and if many people use it, it can be written and recorded. It is still not addressing the main problem of how the people feel and how these gender neutral people will adapt to society. And it's mainly because not only you, but many people have hesitation against it because as you said, society tend to fight back when a change is being made. But that's why some points later I made the examples of Black people and LGBT people, because there are things that in the past were commonly accepted, and today we're like, oh no, that's wrong, we can do this. And I believe this is something that will come evolving in that way. It's just that we could say that we are not ready.
Thanks, Eric. Rebecca, you want to add something?
I believe that in language, the language is power. And as a society, I think that maybe step by step, we can make a difference, or maybe we can make a change.
Here's another question. Should language be changed? I will start with Agustin.
Well, language change every time, every day, every single day change a little bit. We as a like Eric have, like Adriana said, sorry, we record if enough people use that word. Like there are many examples that where like words were bad, weren't like recognized by RAI, but now we recognize them. Or some phonetically speaking words are weird, but we are and at RAI we say now that's a correct way to say it. Why? Because enough people have used it. Language evolve every single day, and we as a RAI record that evolution. But we cannot say that this is a way that people talk just because a tiny minority is talking like that or fighting to talk like that. We as a RAI believe that no one should be discriminated, but we won't force like the language to be to please a little crowd.
Thank you. Adrian, you want to add something? Or it's okay like that?
I think he explained it essentially everything I wanted to say. We as a RAE do not choose how language will evolve, we just record it.
Thank you. Eric.
Well, I want to add that it has been studied that language influences you in the way that a person perceives its environment. Because according to a psychoanalyst, Jiggs Lacan, I believe it's pronounced, he says that the language gives name and gives a meaning of everything that happens around it. So even though, as Agustin said, gender neutral people are a minority, I believe does not make them any less important. Even if you're only placing like a small part of the population, it is something that you need to work on and make sure that everyone, not just the majority of people, are comfortable and in the society. Because as I said before, that's the thing with minorities, and we're fighting. That's the thing with feminists, and that's the thing with the LGBT community, that they want to be have the same rights and be part without being discriminated in the society. That's the main point.
Rebecca.
I want to add something about women and professions and how, yeah, it should be evolving the way we talk about women and professions. And until a few years ago, professions began to be used in feminine. For example, arquitecta, doctora, abogada, instead of abogado, doctor, arquitecto. And I want to talk about this interview with Carolina Tosi, who is a philosopher, and she also is un estudiante de letras. And she talks about an experience that she had and with other two women and other two colleagues that were on debate, and they were juradas. And the letterhead or membrete says jurado in masculine, and all the juradas were women. And I think that's a really like good way to, well, I think that's a good example of how we as a society change that to include women, to include non-binary people in professions.
Thank you very much. So there's no more questions. So in conclusion, language is not a problem of sexism, but it's a reflection that it's already that there is a reflection that is already exists and exists a normalization of this ideology of society. Therefore, inclusive language, whether though the letter E or the at sign, or even making a more specific mention referring to men or women, will have an important impact on the perspective of people towards women and men in areas such as social classes or work. Thank you very much, and this will be the ending of this debate.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.